Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with our staff writer, Collyn Taylor. Collyn was at Will Muschamp's midweek press conference today. Saturday ball game against Texas A&M. The Aggies come in for a 3:30 kickoff. It'll be on the SEC network. A&M is 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the SEC. Gamecocks now 3-2 overall and 2-2 in the league after that bizarre game against Missouri this past Saturday. So, Collyn, Muschamp talked for about 21 minutes today. He talked about Texas A&M. He talked about Travion Williams. He talked about his relationship with Jimbo Fisher. Muschamp worked with Fisher at both Auburn and LSU, so he knows Jimbo quite well. And the Aggies present a real test for the Gamecocks on Saturday because Travion Williams is the top rusher in the SEC right now.
Yeah, and I mean, South Carolina, it's no secret they've had problems stopping the run this year. So that's going to be the key to victory. If they can slow down Travion Williams, easier said than done. That's going to be the key. And you know, Muschamp said that there's really not a whole lot of things they can do schematically to stop it, but it's just about guys fitting their gaps better and not trying to freelance. And he said the tackling needs to be better in the second level, which he said it was last year, to really limit those maybe 8 to 10 yard gains and stop them from turning into 20 to 30 yard gains.
A&M beat Kentucky. Kentucky was ranked 13th in the country, and A&M beat them at Kyle Field this past Saturday in overtime. Kentucky actually got the football to start the OT but missed a field goal, and then Williams scored on a 10-yard touchdown run to end the ball game. He ran for 138 yards in that contest, and Kellen Mond, the A&M quarterback, threw for 2 touchdowns. So A&M, with a real feel-good win for them, and they now open a 3-game road stand, all in SEC play, 3 straight games on the road in conference.
Yeah, and I think that, you look at that Kentucky team, and that Kentucky team's probably the best one that is, Stoops is fielded there, and for A&M to shut down a potent rushing attack like what Benny Snell is huge, and, I think A&M's going to come in feeling pretty confident about themselves after a big win like that in overtime. A game they really should have probably won in regulation as well. But I think South Carolina's excited to get them, especially at home after last year when they were up 2 touchdowns. I think this is a pretty big swing game for South Carolina because, you're still trying to fight for bowl eligibility and you got games against Clemson and a Florida team that looks really good. So I think this is to really hope A&M comes in and I don't want to say is deflated, but is riding too much of a high coming off a big win against a good Kentucky team.
So A&M opens this 3-game road trip at South Carolina on Saturday, and then they will head to Mississippi State, and then it'll be Auburn. They do have a bye week after the South Carolina game, and the Gamecocks are coming up on their bye week as well after the Texas A&M game. So, Collyn, let's talk about the Gamecocks. Run defense, a real concern. You mentioned that right at the top, and before we get into that, let's go over the injury report. Jake Bentley practiced on Tuesday, according to Muschamp. Muschamp said he thought he looked good. And if Bentley is healthy, he will start against Texas A&M.
Yeah, and I think that's the right decision to make. There's a reason Jake Bentley was the starter heading into the season. There's a reason that Bentley was the starter last year over Scarnecchia. And these things happen, and we're not privy to practice during the season. But, Jake is, from what we've seen, I think the more, talented quarterback in terms of skill set. But Scarnecchia has done some good things as well. And I think Jake Bentley will start this game. I think that's probably the right decision to make. And Muschamp said today that no matter what, if Bentley struggles, then the coaches are going to make the decision that's best to win the football game. And I think that they won't be as hesitant to put Scarnecchia in now that he's proven the fact that he can win big games and can be a pretty serviceable starter as well.
I thought it was interesting, Collyn. At one point in the press conference today, Phil Kornblut asked Muschamp if Scarnecchia's performance against Missouri made it more likely that Muschamp would put Scarnecchia in the game at some point in the future. And Muschamp wanted nothing to do with that question. It was a very curt answer that he gave, and he said, we'll make decisions to help us win games. And he was on to the next question. He did not want to field that question at all.
Yeah, and I think that the leash may be getting a little bit shorter on Jake just because Scarnecchia did play well against a good Missouri a good Missouri front four. I wouldn't necessarily say that their secondary is world beaters, but that was a good front four that Missouri had, and Scarnecchia played well against it. The competition goes up a little bit this week with a really, really good A&M defense coming in. which is why I think you kind of have to give the nod to Bentley, who's played not only Texas A&M before, but good defenses before. So, but I do kind of think that the leash is maybe a little bit shorter. I don't know how much for Jake Bentley. But, I think they won't hesitate as much as they would maybe in years past of putting Scarnecchia in if need be.
I thought it was some of the better quarterback play I've seen from the Gamecocks, at least this year. But I think the Missouri defense, not one of the better ones that the Gamecocks will see, particularly over the rest of the 2018 season. But all in all, Scarnecchia gets 2 thumbs up for his performance on Saturday, particularly with that late drive. And I thought he made good decisions with the football all day. So looks like Bentley will start if he's healthy, but Muschamp did say that both quarterbacks will need to be prepared to play. So that's kind of the philosophy going into the rest of the week. So Collyn, Muschamp talked about the run defense, and he said that the Gamecocks need to defeat a block and make a tackle, and they just haven't done enough of that this year.
Yeah, and that's something that comes with experience. And they're playing a lot of guys on the defensive line and then the linebacker and even in the secondary that just don't have the game experience at South Carolina that you might need. You look up front, and Javon Kinlaw's only in his second year of playing in the SEC. Danny Fennell's played well. DJ Wandham's been out. But Aaron Sterling's in the starting lineup, and he's not, he didn't start a game up until this year. So it's just kind of about getting guys stronger and getting guys, experience. And, Danny Fennell said today that a lot of the problems in the run game comes from some of these younger guys that are just out of high school that are so used to being the bigger, faster, and stronger guy that they can just go out and make plays, that it doesn't work like that in college. And so they're having to kind of teach these younger freshmen, the Rick Sandages and the J.J. Mbares of the world, that you need to stay in your gap, because if you stay in your gap, then good things tend to happen. And if you freelance, then it could, cause them to break a big run or something like that. So I think the run defense will come. It's just a matter of getting some of those younger guys some more game experience, and then teaching them to kind of, the adage in football, stay home and not try and do too much on the play, because when you do too much, that's when they can bust a big one on you.
Yeah, Muschamp said that there are a couple things that he's noticed on film that the Gamecocks need to improve on in terms of schematics, and he feels like Gamecock defenders need to defeat a block and make a tackle, and that's really what it is coming down to, and that's what they're going to need to do this weekend against Texas A&M. Collyn, the Gamecock third down defense has been very good this year. Muschamp talked about the improved third down defense, and he said South Carolina has met its goal every game this year of getting off the field 70% of the time on third down. That's a good number.
Yeah, and, you look at it, and they're one of the best third down defenses in the league right now. I think right now they're maybe second behind Alabama or something like that. I don't have the stats in front of me, but they've been really good, and they practice it every week in practice. And they just kind of – I think it's a point of pride for them, that and the red zone defense, that no matter what, they're going to get off the field on third down for the most part, and they're going to stop you in the red zone. And it comes down to having some pretty solid freshmen on the back end. And for as inconsistent or as bad as the run defense has been this year, they do have some pretty solid pass rushers in Aaron Sterling, and Javon Kinlaw is big enough to do it and want him when he's healthy. So that's a big thing too, is why I think they play so well on third downs, is being able to get after the quarterback when they need to.
Obvious concern about the South Carolina run defense after Missouri ran for about 270 on Saturday. Gamecocks still found a way to win. And Collyn, questions today as well about the Gamecocks run game offensively. South Carolina ran 47 times against Missouri for 128 yards, 2.7 yards a carry. That's not a good figure. And Muschamp said that sometimes the run game isn't pleasing to the eye. My question to you, Collyn, is why would you run the football 47 times when you're only averaging 2.7 yards a carry?
Yeah, and that's kind of the weird part about it is, as fans and, as some media, you think that if the run game's not working, you go to the pass full time, but you also got to think about keeping it balanced. And if you start passing a whole lot, then the linebackers and defensive backs can kind of sit back and not, scooch up in the box or things like that. And the secondary and defensive line can pin their ears back and pass rush. So you have to be able to run the ball and keep the defense honest. And a lot of people really don't think too. I mean, those field conditions Saturday, especially in that third quarter, were as bad as I've seen. And it's going to be hard to throw the ball there, and it's going to be hard to do anything other than really run it, which is why I think you saw a lot of runs, especially late in the game, because the field was sloppy, the balls were wet. They tried to get in a dry ball as much as possible, but it's hard to do when you're trying to go tempo. And there was a lot to why I think they had almost 50 carries Saturday, and a lot has to do with that second half and things like that.
Yeah, you can't be one-dimensional offensively. You might not be a very good rushing team, but you have to show the run. Muschamp said that the defensive lines that the Gamecocks face in the SEC, if you get one-dimensional, these defensive lines will come after you and they will tee off on your quarterback. So you have to show the run. And I wasn't trying to suggest that the Gamecocks ran it too much or shouldn't be running the football. I just thought Muschamp gave a very solid explanation of why, you run the football even if you're not always doing it as well as you would like. So that was interesting from today's press conference. A couple more odds and ends here before we wrap up the podcast today. And before we do that, I want to encourage you to take advantage of the Gamecock Central hotline and get involved in our Game Day podcast here on Gamecock Central Radio. We set this hotline number up for you. You can call in, leave us a voice message, questions, comments, feedback, call the number, leave a recording, and we will play that recording during the Game Day podcast on Saturday. The phone number for the GC hotline, 803-497-9058. It's 803-497-9058. Taking your questions, your calls on the Texas A&M game right now, and we'll get you in on the Game Day podcast here on GCR on Saturday. Collyn, Brian Edwards, Muschamp said he practiced on Tuesday and is fine. There was concern about Edwards because he was limping around after the game, and Muschamp said that he was fatigued on that ankle injury by the end of the game.
Yeah, he injured that ankle against Kentucky and wasn't 100% going into Saturday's game. Had it taped up pretty heavily, and it's easy to run on that ankle when the adrenaline's pumping, and it's really, you're really not thinking about it. But when you have such a start and stop game like they had, where you're on your ankle and then you're off it for an hour and 15 minutes on that lightning delay, it could tense up on you and things like that. So, he's fine. I expect him to play this weekend, but it was just one of those situations where the ankle, got a little tired after being on it for so long and taped up as heavy as it was.
3:30 kick Saturday at Williams-Brice for South Carolina, Texas A&M. It'll be on the SEC Network. A&M's 4-2, wins over Northwestern State, Louisiana Monroe, Arkansas, and Kentucky, and the two losses to Clemson, which was ranked number 2 in the nation at the time, and 3 weeks ago to number 1 ranked Alabama. Gamecocks 3-2 and 2-2 in the league. 3:30 kick Saturday, SEC Network. Collyn Taylor, thanks for the report.
Thank you for having me on.
That's Collyn Taylor, our staff writer, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. More to come on the Texas A&M game this week here on GCR. Thanks for joining us.